Why walking away became the smartest move. Walking away is often mistaken for failure. We're taught to believe that endurance is strength and persistence is proof of character. But sometimes the bravest decision isn't pushing forward. It's knowing when to step back. This story begins at the moment someone realized that staying no longer made sense. It begins in that uncomfortable space where loyalty to a path conflicts with loyalty to oneself, where the weight of what was invested battles against the pull of what could be. This is a story of recognizing that not all commitments deserve to be kept, and that sometimes growth requires letting go. For years, they have been praised for their commitment. They showed up early, stayed late, and carried responsibility without complaint. In a world that rewards reliability, they became indispensable, and on paper, that looked like success. But today, as more people question what sustainable work truly means, this story matters because it challenges a dangerous assumption that staying is always the right choice. Their dedication was visible and valued. Colleagues relied on them. Managers praised them. Performance reviews glowed. Yet beneath the accolades, something was quietly eroding. A sense of purpose, a connection to the work, a feeling that the effort mattered beyond the immediate tasks completed. The signs were subtle at first. A sense of exhaustion that rest couldn't fix. A lack of excitement where pride once lived. They weren't burned out. They were drained by work that no longer aligned with who they were becoming. Still, they told themselves to hold on. Walking away felt irresponsible, even reckless. Why leave something stable when so many people were struggling to find it? The external markers of success, salary, title, security, remained intact. Nothing had objectively failed. The problem was harder to name. They had outgrown the container that once fit them perfectly. But stability has a hidden cost when it traps growth. What feels secure can become a cage when it prevents evolution. The comfort of the known becomes discomfort when staying requires suppressing essential parts of yourself. Stability promises safety, but it cannot guarantee fulfillment. Sometimes the steadiest path is the one leading nowhere meaningful. They began noticing how often they were surviving the week instead of engaging with it. How often they postponed happiness until the next milestone. Promotion, bonus, recognition. Each reward promised relief, yet none delivered it. The gap between effort and fulfillment widened, and the thought they tried hardest to avoid finally surfaced. The pattern was clear. Achieve the goal, feel briefly satisfied, then immediately redirect focus to the next target. Happiness remained perpetually deferred, always just beyond the next achievement. The treadmill never stopped, and the destination never arrived. What if staying was costing them more than leaving ever could? This question felt dangerous because it undermined everything they had built their identity around. It suggested that the cost-benefit analysis they had never explicitly run might reveal an uncomfortable truth, that the price of staying, measured in vitality, creativity, joy, authenticity, exceeded any benefit stability provided. That question marked the beginning of a decision that would challenge everything they believed about success. It opened a door they kept firmly closed, and once opened, it could not be ignored. The question demanded an answer, and avoiding it required more energy than facing it. The question followed them into every corner of their routine. It appeared during long meetings, late evenings, and quiet mornings before the day began. What once felt like dedication now felt like endurance. They were no longer choosing their work. They were surviving it. And the realization unsettled them more than any workload ever had. The shift was profound. From active participant to passive endurer, from someone building something to someone merely maintaining it. The work had not changed. They had. They tried to silence the doubt with logic. Leaving didn't guarantee anything. Staying at least offered security, a steady income, a known identity. Walking away meant explaining themselves to others, confronting uncertainty, and starting over in ways they weren't sure they were ready for. The risks felt enormous, and fear made them feel irresponsible for even considering it. The rational arguments for staying were strong. Every practical consideration pointed toward remaining. Only one voice argued for leaving, but it was getting louder, the voice of their inner truth, quiet but persistent. But fear couldn't erase the truth they felt in their body. The exhaustion wasn't physical, it was emotional. They noticed how their creativity had dulled, how curiosity had faded, how they had begun counting time instead of engaging with it. Sundays felt heavy. Mondays arrived too quickly. And somewhere along the way, work had stopped being a place of growth and become a place of survival. The body kept a score that the mind tried to rationalize away. Tension lived in their shoulders. Fatigue settled in their chest. Their system knew something was wrong, even when their thoughts tried to convince them otherwise. The conflict intensified when they imagined their future if nothing changed. The image was clear and deeply uncomfortable. Same role, same pressure, same promises of eventually. The thought of repeating the same year again and again felt more frightening than the idea of leaving. For the first time, staying felt like the bigger risk. This perspective shift was crucial. The safe choice was revealed as dangerous, and the dangerous choice began to look like the only safe one. The greatest risk was not uncertainty. It was certainty that nothing would improve. Still, walking away felt like betrayal of their effort, their identity, the version of themselves that worked so hard to get there. Letting go meant admitting that success, on paper, didn't equal success in life. It meant questioning rules they had followed without doubt for years. The sunk cost fallacy whispered that all those years of investment would be wasted if they left now. But another truth emerged. Those years were already spent, and continuing down the same path would not redeem them. It would only compound the loss. The tension reached its peak during a moment of brutal honesty. Alone in silence, they asked themselves a question they could no longer avoid. If nothing changes, will I be proud of the life I'm building? The question stripped away every rationalization, every excuse, every externally imposed standard. It cut through noise to reach the core: pride, authenticity, alignment. Not whether others would approve, but whether they would respect themselves. The answer arrived immediately, and it changed everything. The answer was no. Simple, clear, undeniable. They would not be proud. They would be regretful, resentful, diminished. That single word, no, contained a world of clarity. It meant that every day spent continuing the current path was a day spent building a life they did not want. The answer didn't come with relief. It came with weight, a heavy, undeniable truth that settled into their chest and refused to move. They knew then that the discomfort they felt wasn't temporary. It wasn't something to push through or outwork. It was a signal that the life they were living no longer matched the person they were becoming. The dissonance between outer circumstance and inner truth had reached a breaking point. Staying would require continuous self-betrayal, a daily compromise of authenticity that would erode them slowly but completely. The internal conflict intensified. One part of them argued for patience, for loyalty, for holding on just a little longer. After all, they had invested years of effort, sacrifice, and identity into this path. Walking away felt like erasing that history. It felt like admitting defeat, even though nothing had technically gone wrong. This voice spoke in the language of obligation, duty, and fear. It warned of judgment, regret, and instability. It painted leaving as weakness and staying as strength. The other part of them pushed back with quiet urgency. It reminded them of how often they felt drained instead of inspired, how often they postponed joy in exchange for stability, how often they told themselves, just get through this phase. That voice asked a harder question. How many phases are you willing to survive before you choose to live? This voice spoke in the language of truth, integrity, and possibility. It recognized that life was finite and that time spent in misalignment was time lost forever. It understood that courage sometimes looks like letting go rather than holding on. The tension followed them into sleep and woke with them in the morning. They began to notice how much energy was spent pretending everything was fine. How much effort went into maintaining an image of success that no longer felt honest. The realization was painful but clarifying. Staying required constant self-betrayal. Every conversation became performance. Every accomplishment felt hollow. The mask grew heavier daily, and the person beneath it grew fainter. They were living someone else's definition of success while abandoning their own. The breaking point came during an ordinary task they had done hundreds of times before. As they worked, they felt a wave of detachment wash over them. Their hands moved automatically, but their mind was elsewhere. In that moment, it became clear. They were no longer present in their own career. They were just fulfilling it. The realization was stark and undeniable. They had become a ghost in their own life, going through motions without meaning, executing tasks without purpose. The final illusion shattered. This was not sustainable, and it was not noble. It was simply sad. That realization stripped away the last excuse. Walking away was no longer about courage or fear. It was about integrity, about choosing a life that reflected their values rather than one that merely met expectations. The decision crystallized. Staying would be the betrayal, not leaving. Staying would mean choosing comfort over truth, security over growth, approval over authenticity. And once that became clear, the choice was obvious. And once they understood that, the decision they've been avoiding began to take shape, clear, unavoidable, and ready to be faced. The path forward was not guaranteed to be easy, but it was unquestionably honest. And honesty, they finally understood, was non-negotiable. The moment they accepted the truth, something inside them steadied. The fear didn't vanish, but it lost its power. Walking away no longer felt like escape. It felt like alignment. Staying would have meant continuing a life that required constant compromise. Leaving meant honoring the clarity they had finally earned. The decision brought peace not because uncertainty disappeared, but because authenticity returned. They were finally acting in accordance with their deepest truth rather than external expectations. So they chose to step away, not impulsively, not dramatically, with intention, with honesty, with respect for everything the chapter had given them, and for everything it could no longer offer. The decision felt heavy at first, like releasing a weight they had carried for so long it had become familiar. But beneath that heaviness was relief, space, possibility. They gave notice professionally, tied up loose ends gracefully, and left with integrity intact. No bridges burned, no relationships damaged, just a clean, honest exit. The days that followed were unsettling and liberating all at once. Without the structure they once relied on, they were forced to listen, to curiosity, to instinct, to the parts of themselves that had been quiet for years. They explored ideas without pressure. They reconnected with interests they once dismissed as impractical. Slowly, direction began to form, not from obligation, but from alignment. The transition was not seamless. There were moments of doubt, financial anxiety, and social discomfort. But beneath the surface challenges was a deeper sense of rightness, a feeling that they were finally moving in harmony with themselves. What surprised them most was how quickly energy returned. Not because the path ahead was easy, but because it was honest. Each step forward felt earned. Each uncertainty felt meaningful. Walking away had not erased their past. It had clarified it. The skills, resilience, and perspective they carried became tools for building something new. They discovered that the years spent in the old role were not wasted, but were preparation, teaching them exactly what they needed and what they would never accept again. Looking back, they realized the smartest move they ever made wasn't staying loyal to a path that no longer fit. It was trusting themselves enough to let go. Walking away didn't close doors. It opened the one they had been standing in front of all along. The decision to leave created space for something better to emerge, something aligned with who they actually were rather than who they thought they should be. And sometimes, the bravest decision isn't pushing forward. It's choosing yourself. The courage is not in enduring what no longer serves you, but in having the clarity and strength to release it. Walking away, when done with intention and integrity, is not failure. It is self-respect made visible. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. And sometimes that shift is simply recognizing that you deserve better than mere survival. You deserve a life that feels true. Why